Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to Writers and Books, a visiting author series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for all ages, all currently available online. For more information, you can see our website at wab.org. Tonight, we're so happy to have Jessica Cuello with us tonight. She is the author of Pricking from Tiger Bark Press, which won the 2017 CNY Book Award, and Hunt, which received the 2016 Washington Prize. She's also the author of the chapbooks My Father's Bargain, By Fire, and Curie. She's the recipient of the 2018 New Ohio Review Poetry Prize, 2013 New Letters Poetry Prize, and a 2015 Saltonstall Writing Fellowship. She teaches French in Central New York and is a poetry editor for Tahoma Literary Review. As the writer Hannah Vanderhart has said, the strange glow of Cuello's poetry is the light of human living, an experience that never somehow feels ordinary. Each of Cuello's collections reads as a lyric catalog, gathering an abundance of wreck and loveliness that transgresses the nets of their lines and stanzas. We'll hear from Jessica first, and then she'll be in conversation with Steve Huff, the publisher of Tiger Bark Press, as well as a writer of poetry and fiction as well. We'll also take your questions. Feel free to submit them through the Q&A function. We also have Jessica's book, Hunt, available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll provide that link in the chat. Jessica and Steve, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I'm really excited to read for Writers and Books, and I'm glad that we still have readings. And it's nice to see some familiar names from other places in the country. I'm going to read a little bit from each of my two books, and then I'm going to finish with a couple new poems. So I'm starting with the Tiger Bark Press book. And whoops, sorry, I'm uncoordinated here. Whoa, there we go. You think I've been teaching on Zoom long enough. This is my book, Pricking, which is published by Tiger Bark Press, a local press out of Rochester. Steve Huff, the publisher, is here tonight. And I'm going to read a poem from the first section, which is in the voice of a Kathar woman from the 14th century, a heretical sect in the Languedoc region of France. The Foot of Montségur. A rumor said we crept in and dug like animals, a hollow for the Grail. The friars weren't listening. At Albi or Verfeil, we buried nothing. I think of the spaces where we lived. Landscape is a corner of my eye, papery like dry ashen leaves. The Crusaders brought a map with blue cut into the outline of our Languedoc. I touched the lightweight edge where our caves would be. We worshipped in the walls. I loved to steady the child's head with a light touch on the ear, her patient stare while I combed the long hair back, breathed the cold, cutting air, and buried the afterbirths. I knew there was no mistake about the body and routine. God did not send us out but back. The most physical of all, I rocked as in a body what I felt a boat must be. I see cliffs transparent, how grainy water is, and finally I watch the iron density of flame. All night, sun sets on the town. Easily they fit us in the circle. We are the last of us. Also from this book, I'm going to read a few Joan of Arc poems. They're very short and spare. I actually just realized I have a Joan of Arc lithograph, and it's right there in the upper right corner. That's just a coincidence, except that I love Joan of Arc. Jeanne d'Arc thinks of her virginity. The calf won't get born. The cow moans and father unbends the leg stuck in her flesh. I pretend not to know that he told my brothers to drown me if I left. A child is heavy on the feet, clinging with an open mouth. A virgin can prophesy for God, but once a mother, nothing else. This poem feels apt. It's a little poem I don't read, but it's about kicking the English out. She grew up in a village that was often destroyed by marauders. The bishop's turn. So this poem occurs after the bishops betrayed her and sold her to the English. It was not vanity, the certainty in my voice, the sword, the horse, 3 of us moving without a seam. 2 years, the sweetness of a path, always sure. God in my ear, the English out, the English out. Isabel Dark thinks of Joan. When you broke the marriage contract, you were my lanky girl. I dressed your torso by the fire, picked grasses off your hair. I hear your humming while I work, as if you left it in the timbers of our home. The shifting of the heat and cold, coax it out and you are here. I had to hold your father back. He dreamed you left with soldiers for the war. I put my hands on him, held in our loss. You were not ours. We all knew what you'd seen. We'd seen it too. Village burnt, cattle gone. So I'm going to switch to my second book. And this one is Hunt. Why is this so hard for me? This is why I can't do sports besides running. It's Hunt, and it's basically it's a feminist Moby Dick. It's in response to Moby Dick. The parts. Let's see. Maybe it's the absent feminine from Moby Dick. So I'm going to read a few of these, and each poem corresponds to a chapter. Queen Mab, The Whale Has a Dream, chapter 31. She hath been with me, my tooth lodged in his leg, swimming through cold spots where the sun was not, the water black, sleeping, my hand hit your chest and the blanket bled. Your eyes in my eyes and arms in arms. I beat you down and beat against the door. I swam, was flying, was breach and dove. Fear was dust. Chase was over, old and tired, turned around, turned face, turned rage and strength. I left water, I grew legs. I made a raft for the child, but the men I sank. And I think I want to read some Ahab poems. Also apt, the end of Ahab. So this one is chapter 125, The Log and Line, and it also has a reference to the character Pip. If you haven't read Moby Dick, he was the black cabin boy. And it begins with a quote from the chapter about a line that's loose. Earlier in the book, Pip is left abandoned in the sea. Sir, I mistrust it. This line looks far gone. Pip came up to the men as if he were the lost line, being pulled back in, or the wood gone in the current let go. No telling how fast the ship goes now, or where she is. No reflection in his eyes, not there. Astern, he was lost with the line, cut off, no more alive, no more inside the self, like Ahab, who turned to Pip for what had emptied out of him. The human part keeps reaching out. Pip touched Ahab's hand, called it velvet shark skin. Hand in hand, boy and man, torturers have children, and the devil loves. The Chase, First Day, Chapter 133. The word brother is not his word. It's me versus them. Alone, too young, he set out to find a flesh to press into his flesh. Went straight for a lover, direct, tongue for tongue, and eyes for her. But everyone turns enemy. Crew is utilitarian, even her single hair on his tongue. Her naked skin tastes hostile. Still, in his first migration, he glanced behind for brother eyes, for a Godhead figure he resembled. And I'm going to read the last chapter in the book where Ahab is destroyed. The whale is no longer an object of desire, chapter 135. I left him with his bloody patience. I left him with his splinters. I breathed through a spout, warm-blooded with a heart, a chest he crushed with his, a chest he roped to mine and wet to death. Farewell to my arch when I left him. Farewell to my underside, unmarked. Farewell to my chase. Farewell to my object. His hunt was a kind of love. Catch the stranger and devour. How am I wild and he is not? I was born from the buried place, born in a herd. He issued from the shore, the place grown upside down. He issued with his hurt saved up. He issued into exile, hurled. He came higher than the waves. His lust an arsenal of instruments. Could it have been different? He walked on water, laid hands on my leg, my calf, little muscle like a seal. One day I became pieces made, a torn up species. I became my features. Then the conversation stopped. This is the one-sided part. And I'm going to finish up with a couple new poems, and I think just two. So this one is called My Babysitter, Karen B., who was sent to Willard Asylum. And if you're local, you know, you might be familiar with Willard Asylum, which was around in the 70s. I don't know when it closed. There are only 2 photos of me as a child. She took them. She had no child. She had cool cigarettes and a job at the drugstore. She gave me the Crayola box with the built-in sharpener. 400 suitcases were stored in the attic of Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. She joined her twin brother there. She wore her black hair down. A child could admire it. She bought me an Easter basket, a stuffed rabbit whose fur rubbed off. She walked everywhere. She painted circles of blush on her cheeks. Loony, people said so. I mean grown-ups who saw signs, who passed her on our street before she started to call and say, remember. On the phone, she said, remember the date we killed her brother, forgetting he'd been committed. I took her hand and tagged along like an animal. She was perfect to a child. In 1995, when the asylum closed, an artist took photos of the 400 suitcases. The photos were put online, the contents laid out respectfully. In the open suitcases, belts, pocket knives, Lone Ranger cards, keys, ribbons, shoe polish, mirrors, pills, a fountain pen, bottle of glycerin, a zither, kit of needles, bread ration card, the Gospel of John, a letter. Each suitcase had a name: Lena C., Lillian L., Mary T., Gloria P., Cassie M., Francis T., Marion R., Catherine S., Demetra Z., Ruby C., Anthony C., FJL, Viola G., Alice T., Carrie L., Karen B., remember. And one last poem. Ode to Loneliness. This is good for quarantine. You're a room with no doors, the innermost white ash of the fire, a wool coat with X's sewn on the inside. You are a liar. We lie side by side. You shape the ceiling fan, sing from the iron vent, whisper to the one-armed boy. When the child wakes in the empty house, you are waiting. They say you live in fields of snow, but you hate starkness. I breathe your cold skin. You are a gravestone face, a nursery rhyme in the body, the old man who played one, who played knick-knack on my thumb. When the nurse's tender fingers touch your neck, you cry. Your nerves are pale strikes of lightning across the silent lake. We touch with just eyes. You read to rid yourself of invisibility, and at night become a lone toll booth worker, hunched with fluorescent desire. That's it.
Thank you, Jessica. Let's see, I'm gonna start. There we are. I guess I'm going to ask you questions now. By the way, that was a wonderful reading. This might be a rather large question, but I've thought about it a lot. I was rereading Hunt today, and I was wondering, can you talk about your attraction to history, or more specifically, your gravitation away from the contemporary and personal that we're so used to in contemporary poetry, and to the voices of other centuries, and do you sense that in those persona voices in 12th century France, or in the time of Moby Dick, in the whale hunting, do you sense a part of yourself in those persona voices?
I think so. I don't think I could write the poems if I didn't do that. And I think there's a part of it that's not, cheating's not the right word, but I think the contemporary feelings are often too intense for me, and it gives me a little bit of distance. But also I do feel that I feel artistically drawn to those things, and I don't deliberately set out to do it, but usually something happens that it's inspirational. The Kathar poems, I was teaching in this classroom in Texas, and there were these old books from like the 40s and 50s. And one of them was just photographs of that region. And it's a region I've actually never visited. And I kept staring at these photos. And then I took the book home, and I felt very drawn to the geographic region. And then I checked a lot of books out of the library on the Cathars, and then the poems just came forth. So I think I'm definitely layering my own. I don't think you can write poems without your own feelings and experiences. I've started to do that a little bit, so that might be forthcoming. A lot of my first chapbook was Marie Curie, and a lot of the history and the figures are people that were deeply imprinted on me when I was little. I think a lot of women read this Marie Curie biography. Like Susan Sontag has an essay about reading it, and it had such an impact. And then it stayed with me. The Moby Dick poems, I did an NEH grant with a group of teachers. It was Melville and Multiculturalism, and we lived in New Bedford. We slept on a whaling ship. We did all kinds of cool stuff. And I saw these Frank Stella sculptures that also corresponded to the chapters of Moby Dick. And they were really striking. And I hadn't published anything. I was really new as a poet. I was mainly reading poetry. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know you could do that.
Mhm.
And so I started writing the poems, a poem for each chapter, and they were horrible. So this was like 1999 or 98.
Mhm.
And then 10 years later, when I gave birth, and I was staring out the window and I saw a cow nursing, and I really identified with the cow. I'm serious. It wasn't a metaphor. It's like, I totally understand that cow. And then I remembered the poems, and I was like, that's how I want to enter those poems. And I went back and rewrote them. And I think I needed the language and the experience. And then I got rid of all the poems I had originally written, and I entered it through this place of the female perspective,
Mhm.
which is, it's funny because at that Melville seminar was a group of really great teachers. And I remember one day, everyone was saying how problematic it was that there were no women in the book. And my best friend in the program, who's also a teacher, I remember she said, that's not true. Look at the scene of where the whale is nursing. And it was like, it really stood out to me. Does that answer you? I kind of rambled a little bit, but.
No, that's a good answer. I was wondering too, do you wonder about accessibility? For example, does the reader have any advantage over the listener? I mean, that if you, pricking has notes in the back, and as with Hunt, I could look up words like cetology and like that I don't know if I might miss that listening to it. Does that ever concern you at all?
No, it's poetry. So
Mm-hmm.
I think,
Mm-hmm.
that's the one place where you're allowed to be as narrow as your heart
Mm-hmm.
desires.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the books I love most have that kind of narrow perspective to them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there probably are people who didn't read it for that reason, I'm sure.
Can't help that.
You can't help that. You can't help that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that, I have some readers who said, I don't like Melville. I never finished that book, but I like the poems. So I hope that the poems can stand by themselves too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think most of them do, and I think the book kind of, this may be heavy praise. It joins this orbit of really good books that are in the whole sphere around Moby Dick, that have extrapolated from Moby Dick. and thinking of Charles Olson's Call Me Ishmael, which is a very different book from yours, and yet that was for a book of criticism, that was very, very creative. And here in this book, you're giving voice to the whales, you're giving a voice to Ahab's wife. It's really, I think, extraordinary book.
Thanks.
We probably have some questions. I see that the chat icon has some numbers on it. Dan, do we push that or something?
Well, you can just click on the chat, but I don't
Okay.
see questions.
Oh, there we are.
Yeah, if you have a question, feel free to submit it to the Q&A. And Jessica can answer them. Or if you have any comments, feel free to submit those as well.
I think I do like an organizing principle to my books, though.
How is that?
I like structure so much. So I liked having chapters that I could approach I had multiple copies of Moby Dick,
Mhm.
and I just cut them up and I would lay the different chapters out on the floor, and try writing from different chapters. And it helps. For some reason, I like having a kind of restriction when I write.
Hmm.
I'm hoping as I age, that's going to evolve. So, because the last two poems were a little bit more personal,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and
The quarantine and everything.
contemporary, they exist in the central New York 70s, 80s era.
Mhm.
So,
Questions, anyone?
oh, okay, I see questions. Adela, what are your current obsessions? What are you working on now? So, I'm almost embarrassed about this now, but I have a whole new manuscript of Mary Shelley poems, which has also been, I guess I love that century. I do love that century. And I thought I was getting away from that kind of book, but they sort of came out in a rush. And I wrote them in epistolary form.
Mhm.
To the monster and also to her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft.
Mary Wollstonecraft, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and I included notes.
Mhm.
So that's a new obsession.
Mhm.
And Charlie had a question. Wait, so there's okay. What is your writing practice? Ooh. Okay. And Judy, does that mean that announcement is out? If you got that email, I don't know. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, Charlie with the hard questions. My writing practice. Well, I am a mother of two and I teach public school full time, and I've been doing that for 24 years. So my writing practice is desperate, I guess. Summers, weekends, sometimes I put Post-its on. I did a lot of writing during the quarantine. I put Post-its on my door telling people to keep out, which worked. My kids are older, so they respect it. I do a lot of reading as my writing practice. I will read writers that I'm imitating, that I want to sound like, and then I will avoid people that I don't. So sometimes I'll just be gravitating towards certain writers that I'm admiring. And it's like they always said about the painting, when you copy the painting, you don't end up really taking the style. So if I told you who I was reading during each of those books, you probably wouldn't see that person in the book. But reading is a big part of my practice, and then just trying to get some quiet time to myself.
Mhm. Looks like there's a question. Speaking of other writers' voices, who do you count among your influences?
So Lucy Brock-Broido was one of the first poets that I was reading when I started to think about publishing. And I read her 3 books in a rush. And then my favorite of her books, which is A Hunger, I think I read that book 25 times. And I loved her voice. I also love C.D. Wright and Anne Carson. Shane McRae, I think I stole a lot of Shane McRae's rhythms, or I wanted to, when I was writing Hunt. And those are some of my favorites. So let's see. Judy. Okay, Judy said, I appreciate that Jessica seems to gravitate toward multiple poems on each subject. Did she see that in someone's work that she admired? I mean, I think when the Hunt, it was the Frank Stella, the Moby Dick poems, it was the Frank Stella sculptures that I was copying, the idea of doing a series of pieces from a single work. But I do love poets that do projects in their books, like Anne Carson's Knox and Autobiography of Red. I like books that have a narrative to them. I love lyric poems too. Let's see.
Well, your poems do seem to be at a sort of an intersection between lyric and narrative, really.
Thank you. That is a really nice compliment. Because it's a challenge to not be too informational that you lose the poetry and you're just conveying information, which is why I put the notes. And some people really don't like notes. Some people don't want notes. I love, and Lucy Brock-Broido is where I got the notes idea. She has the master letters is full of notes. And I love a book where I can go back and look at notes. It doesn't bother me at all. Rachel is my friend from college study abroad. So this is the cool thing about Zoom, that people in your life can hear you read. What led you to begin to turn to the more contemporary and personal? I think I just am getting braver and older and less afraid of being vulnerable in my work. It's kind of simplistic, but if you're writing as a Kathar, there's a certain mask and a freedom in that, which I think I needed because I'm kind of a shy and cautious person, even on the page. And I admire poets that are not, but I'm being true to who I am. I'm a little bit shy, so. So this is from Allison. Speaking of other writers' voices, who do you count among your influences? Oh, and then the second, are you familiar with Marilyn Nelson's book-length poem series, for example, Carver? Yes. And I love it. I mean, I think if you put a lot of poems, a stack of poetry books, contemporary books, you would find that a third of them are projects or series. It's something that people do quite often. It seems like a lot of women do it also. And sometimes I wonder if that's because for a long time, I think people thought writing, because the very first chapbook I wrote was fairy tales, which are about the horror of the domestic realm, which if you're just writing about domestic things, I mean, okay, Sharon Olds did it, but there was you had this certain feeling that it was mundane. You know, you might have an editor write to you, like, no one wants to read your poem about X or about menstruation, or no one wants, there was a period, now that's changed, but I wonder too if a lot of women have gravitated to persona for that reason, because it allows you to feel legitimate. I wouldn't say that about Marilyn Nelson. She doesn't need that, but I know men have done a lot of persona.
Let's see. Well, this is a comment. Bravo, what a treat to hear you read and talk about your work. And here's another one, hunched with fluorescent desire. Wow.
Steve, thank you so much for those questions about hunt and pricking.
Well, they're both really fine books, and I'm really proud that Tiger Bark published Pricking. I wish we'd gotten our hands on the Hunt, to tell you the truth, but WordWorks did a really good job on that, and the important thing is that it's out there, and it's a really rich book.
Yeah. This is just a personal aside, but the week that Pricking came out, it was 4 years ago to the 2016 election. And so and I remember because it was my birthday and I woke up and we had the president we had, and then I drove out to Rochester and I met you for the first time. And I read from Pricking. And so I don't know, I always think these things are so symbolic and interesting, but here we are 4 years later and I got to read it from it again in Rochester via Zoom, but
Well, they can't help but be symbolic in some way.
Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you. And nice to see you, Dan.
Yeah, it's good to see you all. Thank you to Jessica and to Steve. Thank you everyone who came. Her links to buy her books are in the chat. Buy her books, wab.org. I do want to point out that if you want Pricking, I hate to say this, you might want to get it at let's see if you can get it on Amazon. We've sold out of it, and I've got to reprint it now. So, which is a good thing. You sold through your print run.
And I have about 20 at home. So if people want to email me, I'll put my email in the chat.
There you go. There you go.
And I can mail you a personal signed copy if you would like.
Excellent.
So I'll put my email in there right now.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
And have a good night.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Thank you, Jessica.
I love writers and books.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, Jesus, you know.
I mean, my first love is DWC in Syracuse. I can't lie, but you guys are a close second.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, they've got longevity. How old is Writers and Books now? Close to 50 years, isn't it?
Almost 40.
Almost 40. Yeah.
All right.
I remember I used to go to it when it was down on South Clinton Avenue. And that little storefront was a tiny little place then. Well, cheerio.
Good night.
Take care.
Good night. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.